Okay, here we go. Stand by. 3, 2, 1, action.
Assume nothing.
Brash, bald-faced blasphemy.
Question everything.
I find it extremely hard to imagine.
Open your eyes.
It is quite all right to be an atheist.
The fastest growing group of people in the country has been measured as being those who have no belief or who are atheists.
You don't have to be apologetic or quiet about it.
Challenge the opposition.
You see religion on 100 fronts losing the argument.
And start thinking. This is The Thinking Atheist Worldwide.
I had a few international listeners, Thinking Atheist page users, ask if this particular radio podcast would be relevant to them because it deals with an American, a United States political party and the political system. And I think it will be. I think we're talking about the viability of a national atheist political party. And I have seen a lot of controversial topics come up. A lot of controversial topics come up since we started this podcast. This is up there. It's in the top 5. It's very, very polarizing. It's a very sensitive nerve with people. And I've heard everything from, I don't ever want to be a part of any group, anywhere, at any time, for any reason. Atheists don't gather. We don't congregate. We don't organize. If we organize, we sold out. I've heard that argument many times. I personally disagree with that, but I hear it a lot. I'm an individual. You can't lump me into a group. And then other people say, we need this. There's so much insanity out there. Imagine the reason that would come together if we were all part of a single political party. We would have, influence, and we would be able to position candidates and do this, and then everybody in between. And so what I'm going to do is start out by just going right to the horse's mouth. We're going to talk to Troy Boyle, the president of the National Atheist Party, and to Jacob Kramer, the vice president of Outreach, and they join me here. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being on the show. It's a pleasure.
Oh, it's my pleasure, definitely.
So, I know you've probably taken some heat by being a part of this highly charged, controversial political party, but make your pitch. What is the National Atheist Party? Why did you start it? Why did you start it? And what does it stand for?
Well, I founded the party with Mark Smith in March 11th of 2011 because both of us were seeing an increasing amount of religious participation in political dialogue. And we're both alarmed by that as atheists, that we didn't want our decisions made for us by people who didn't have our best interests at heart. And looking back into the history of political parties in the United States, we didn't see that atheists had been represented at any point in the last 250 years. So on the spur of the moment, we decided to start an atheist party. Now, originally, we called it the Free Thought Party because we wanted to welcome everyone who is disenfranchised and everyone who wants to see a secular government as opposed to a theocratic Christian right-wing government, which we see gathering more and more supporters every day. So we started it as the Free Thought Party, and we couldn't keep it going. There was arguments in every thread and people calling each other names and not getting along. So we decided to hold a vote of the membership, decide who we are, what we want to call ourselves, and the National Atheist Party is what came out of that vote.
So you have a large group of atheists in the same room, and you talk about something like taxes. What happens?
Well, you would be surprised, actually, at the amount of consensus that we've been able to build from our membership. What we did was present the membership with 18 platform planks on typical political topics like abortion and gun control and immigration and energy. And, what we found is that 70% of the membership or more had to agree in order to adopt a policy. And we didn't have that problem. It was more like 90%, 96%, 97%, or 87% agreement on each one of our platform planks. And it just turns out that atheists are progressive center-left voters.
And, as we build our committees and have policy committees, our firm foundation is that any policy that we suggest needs to be supported by the evidence and needs to align with their core principles that we do have as a party.
Atheists are progressive center-left voters. So I have a libertarian in the audience. He says, is there a place for me in this party? And your response is what?
My response
Absolutely.
is, if you agree with the platforms.
Well, give me some platforms. Where do you stand on the major issues?
Well, for instance, with the abortion debate, the National Atheist Party voted, and the will of the membership is that the decision whether to continue with a pregnancy lies with the mother, that government should not have a voice or a role in a mother's reproductive decisions.
Yeah, abortion's an easy one. Let's talk about like the role of government. Let's talk about healthcare, nationalized healthcare, single-payer healthcare, something along those lines where it's a little more fuzzy. It's a little less clear as to where that line is drawn. Where do you guys fall on some of those issues?
Well, it was voted unanimously, but overwhelmingly that healthcare is a right. We do take that, take that position. We also take the position, to being realistic, that there are other options, and many different ways to do a public option or a single-payer option. And in this country, it seems to get, painted in very stark terms of black or white. Either government completely controls your health care or doesn't it. We don't take that position at all. We take the position that there are working models that yield better, solutions for, overall for the citizens, in a country under that system. And we want to look at those models that are more successful, that have, less infection rates in hospitals, that have, less mortality rates for certain diseases. What do they do is effective, and they consistently do it and are better than us in other countries. And we believe that socialism, as far as that, is not a dirty word, that it's a right that we protect, the weakest among us. I do want to kind of respond to that, to the libertarian thing, and maybe kind of adopt or qualify some of the things that Troy said. We ask, even if somebody doesn't wholly support the platform or they support half of it and they want to change it, the point of the political process is as long as they can, come into our group, engage the leadership, a caucus and discuss with the members that are, in the group and submit what their policy platform arguments are. If they can do that in a civic way, even if they disagree with 75% of what the platform is, we want them to have their say. We want it to be representative. Anybody who can do that, whether they're a hard right libertarian, whether they're ultra liberal, whether they're a theist, and they support our bedrock principle that we need to have evidence-based conclusions, that expertise is valued, and that we do value human life as secular humanists. As long as they support that and are willing to engage civically, we want their opinion represented, and they have to be able to accept the consensus vote of what the membership decides based on that evidence.
Speaking with Troy Boyle and Jacob Kramer of the National Atheist Party. The word consensus is where I get hung up, guys. Look, we can't even agree on lunch. You get this many free thinkers, opinionated free thinkers from wildly varying backgrounds and cultures and opinions and experience and education, and you get them to agree on the basics, you are probably going to have a difficulty achieving consensus. You might get a majority vote. I mean, abortion's easy, stem cell research, those types of things. I don't expect you're going to get much of a fight on. But let's cover the Second Amendment, which covers the right to bear arms. What's your stance on the Second Amendment? I mean, are you against, do you want gun control?
Yeah, that's definitely one of our platform playing positions, and the membership was in agreement that there should be a waiting period, that the gun show loophole needs to be closed, and that we need to have some mandatory education programs in place for gun owners. And it's only a commonsensical. It's only reasonable. I hear what you're saying about consensus, but the fact is, we've achieved it. We have 10,000 atheists right now in 50 states that are all participating in this party, and they've come together in order to have their voice heard politically. And so it's a funny thing that we hear people saying on a daily basis, you can't herd cats, and you'll never develop consensus when we're standing here putting the lie to that right now.
Well, you have people who have joined your party who buy into the concept. But the reason you may be getting that level of consensus is because the people who don't buy it, who don't get it, who won't agree, who aren't going to line up, simply haven't joined up. They're watching from the sidelines, and you already have people of like mind. They already have buy-in. I think, in my opinion, it explains a lot of the consensus that you're achieving. And don't get me wrong, I think it's admirable to try to unify free thinkers. Quite frankly, the idea of having an atheist agnostic in political office, someone who is not parading his family to Sunday church in front of the TV cameras every Sunday, who is not doing religious ceremonies in the White House or whatever they happen to be, who is not invoking God, but, God bless America, God bless these United States, who is not using, I think many often use it, quite frankly, to buttress their own credibility in this country, because for many it works. All you have to do is say you're a Christian or you are religious, and they give you a pass on just about everything else.
Yeah. Well, I would say, the challenge to us, to me, would be easier than any of the major political parties, because maybe they're trying to appeal to more, but we have people who already have a similar outlook on reality. So to me, achieving that consensus is one of the reasons we've been able to easily do it. And on that matter of consensus, the things that we can achieve agreement upon, we will support and advocate for. The things that we cannot, we will not. And eventually, when we are able to run candidates, in the future, it'll be just like any major political party now. We may be able to form a platform that we generally in the NAP support a VAT tax. But there's all kinds of different ways to do a VAT tax, and the individual candidate that you would vote for might have a very specific proposal that he's suggesting, and then you would vote on the candidate, whether you can agree with them. So you're absolutely right. We may reach certain points where we can't reach a consensus on specific policy issues, but that's the same for any political party whatsoever. And the other point is, you may be right, and that's the only concern. And that's why I want to make it very clear that we want every atheist or free thinker or person who can support our general principles that are outlined in our preamble to join and have their say, because we want to know the answer to that question. What can we find consensus on? What can we agree about that needs to change and to have a more honest discussion in this country? We're asking that question, and we're willing to accept when we can't find it. We want to communicate what our membership want. We don't want to put that in the mouths of our membership at all. We want everybody to come engage and have their voice, and let the chips fall where they may.
Rather than speak about a hypothetical, I'll use myself as an example, and this is just one person's opinion, but we stand apart on the issue of nationalized health care. We stand apart that the government could do it effectively, efficiently. We stand apart that health care is a right. We stand apart on this issue, and it's major. It's very big. How do I find a place in the National Atheist Party? It's a huge issue, probably one of several that I simply do not agree with. How do I support you then?
Maybe you don't. We don't claim to be the voice of every atheist in America. We're not trying to be the voice of every atheist in America. The reason we call ourselves the National Atheist Party is as a demographic descriptor of the people who founded the party and who are basically the members of the party. Now, and here's another thing I'd like to say. In America, we have a bipartisan system, and that bipartisan system has become more polarized year after year. I encourage every group of Americans that are like-minded to come together and form a party. If you'd like to form an atheist libertarian party, then go for it. If you want to form a conservative atheist party, then go for it. I'm behind you 100%. We just happened to call it the National Atheist Party. That was what we voted upon. But I don't I don't at all claim to represent every single atheist in America. Nobody could.
Let's talk about the culture right now in America. You say the word atheist, and many people just blanch. Atheist? What are you, an atheist? I mean, it's such a polarizing word, and people have asked me often why I use the Thinking Atheist for the website, and I agree with Richard Dawkins. I think the word should and must be used continually. It must ring in the ears of our critics. They must hear the word, and as we destigmatize it and show them that we are, we're hardworking, law-abiding, moral, loving, wonderful people. Most of us are, and we have a voice. And my thinking is, let's say that you guys end up with some time in the spotlight here in the next 4 years. You got to imagine you're going to be in the crosshairs. I mean, the Christian Coalition folks, and every politician brandishing God as a weapon is going to come right after you. I'm sure you've considered that.
Absolutely.
And what?
Don't
No press is bad press. Are you guys going to go out and just do battle? Is it then going to become an ideological war? Are you going to tackle the theist mindset? I mean, have you guys talked about that?
Yeah, I mean, it is an ideological war because, exactly like you said, we are stigmatized, as a population. We're stigmatized even amongst, some atheists who don't want to believe, as you did in your intro, that we can come together and at least have a discussion to seek if we can agree about things. It is a challenge. I know Troy has received a few death threats. I luckily haven't, so far. But yeah, it's definitely going to be rough. The more attention that we get, the larger that we get. And we're comfortable with moving slow and growing because we've already come a long way in a short time, and there's enough people behind us who are just going to continue pushing forward and asking this question and
nothing worth doing is ever easy, and I don't want to seem cavalier about the issue. Certainly, we're going to attract a combative element, and my strategy to that is, number one, to be as practical and safe as I can be, and number two, if it's just a matter of rhetorical attacks, well, that comes with the territory. And I'm not particularly frightened by a Christian or a theist who wants to accuse me of immorality simply by virtue of being an atheist. That doesn't really faze me because it's a nonsensical statement.
Well, you're probably used to it. I am. I hear it all the time, often from people in my own community. How can you have morals? You're an atheist. How can you have any direction in your life at all? You're an atheist. You're rudderless. You're sad. You're lonely. You're pathetic. You are to be pitied. This wild stereotype of what an atheist is just boggles the mind.
Yeah. My general pushback there is that you're right, I'm not moral, because moral is a set of behavioral guidelines derived from authority, whether real or imagined. And I don't use morality in my day-to-day life to make decisions. However, I'm a very ethical person. And I think that social ethics, as they have evolved out of social dynamics, are a better course to pursue than morality. Because if you're being a moral person and you are doing what the authority has instructed you to do, that authority may not in itself be moral. So for me, social ethics are the way to go.
Speaking of morality, Dan Barker summed it up so well. He said, when he talks about morality, the question to ask is, am I acting to minimize harm? In other words, the Bible says, to don't bear false witness, don't ever lie. And then he posits a scenario where you're hiding an abused spouse in your home, and the abuser comes and pounds on the door and says, "Is she in there?" And you say no, to protect everyone in your family and the abused woman, and he goes away. Well, you've just borne false witness. You just lied. But wasn't that a moral act? You were committing a moral act. You act to minimize harm. I always thought that was kind of a nice measuring stick. I don't know if you guys have an opinion on it.
It sounds like you behaved
exactly.
ethically.
I have two messages here I want to read very quickly. They're a little bit related before we go to the phones, but I want to read these two short blips and then have you respond. Mike said, economics, trade, immigration, the size and scope of government, defense, the Fed, these are not necessarily religious topics. The National Atheist Party platform is very liberal on matters having nothing to do with religion or lack thereof, and I don't support them. Maine said, I support.
Does it have anything to do with religious? That's kind of the whole point of this party is we don't want to have a talk about religion. That's not a part of the conversation except for in matters where it encroaches upon our government. We ask what are the common positions or opinions of atheists on those issues. We don't care whether religion applies to them. We care what the common consensus is of the members who vote. We don't want to have a discussion about religion. We don't feel we have to at all whatsoever.
The second message is from Maine. It says, I support the National Atheist Party 100%. It is synonymous with a mental health party, as both Rethuglicans and Republicrats are certifiably delusional. While many platform planks need grammatical work and may appear liberal to some, National Atheists are all about our civil rights and liberation of all who are oppressed by theocracy. Are you guys just Democratic Party 2.0?
That's a fair...
Well, it's fair that there's similarities of the members who vote. You know, it's fair that I think a number of atheists tend to be progressive and the Democratic if you have 2 points of comparison. I mean, I think that's the point. Like, you know, if we have 2 points of comparison, obviously we're going to be more similar to one of those two things. You know, and people aren't saying we're more similar to the Green Party because people aren't as familiar. People want to categorize and make it easy upon themselves, you know, but there's a number of issues on our platform that are different. And the way we would engage on these issues and have discussion to be a little bit more honest and not engage in magical thinking, I think would be entirely different. If I thought that this wasn't different, I wouldn't be involved. I took my time and kind of joined the party to make sure that wasn't just the case.
I have a difficult time with how we always place everyone in a political cookie cutter, and I know that some people are well deserving. You know, you see the Rick Perry ad, Strong, which was immediately picked up for parody by some brilliant satirists out there.
Yeah, rightly so.
You see that kind of thing, this overt sort of co-opting of religion into what should be a non-religious process. I get that, but I found that even among the religious, the non-religious, most people won't be, they're not a rubber stamp. You can throw out things like, where should taxes be? What about gun control? What about the role of government in foreign affairs? Our borders, healthcare, all these types of things. People normally, I would hope, have very nuanced opinions about it. And one thing about everybody just throwing a huge label at everybody else, I think quite often it oversimplifies what is a very complex problem. You guys communicate day by day, week by week with all of your members to try to achieve consensus on these complex issues?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We have state chapter leaders in every state chapter, and Jacob and I browse every state chapter every day. So we spend a lot of time on the internet responding to threads about just those issues and talking to people about if they have a difference of opinion, if they're a minority voice within the party, then go ahead and campaign for your vision. Put up some informational links and talk about what it is that how you see the topic. And then every year we vote again on the platform to adjust it or add from it or delete from it.
How often do people in that group talk to each other, and how often are they just shouting at each other? If you've seen my comments pages at all, normally it often starts out pretty benign, right? And then before you know it, you know, we're talking about highly confident, very, very confident people. Many bring a kind of a superiority complex to the party, and everybody's got an opinion. You know, it's not long before people are throwing hand grenades at each other. Do you guys see that often?
Oh,
There's actually very little. There's very little of that.
Well, I
would say
that happens when you have multiple forums online. Of course, there's those disagreements. I also, have a large forum, Atheist, and that happens really regularly. But really, in the course of our discussions in leadership, it's usually very, civil. The differences in the state chapter groups and those forums where people join and think it's just a discussion group when it's meant to be, and we have a general discussion group, and people enter in there and think that it's, a place where they can come in and debate or just do anti-theism bashing, whereas we're more interested in, what policy and what political action we want to take, what we stand for and not what we stand against.
You guys up for taking a few phone calls on the switchboard?
Of course.
Sure.
All right. We're talking here with Jacob Kramer and Troy Boyle of the National Atheist Party. We'll start with Jackson in Iowa, who's been on the switchboard for about a half hour. Thanks for your patience. Jackson, welcome to the show. You have a question for these two?
Hey. Yes. I'm kind of held up on the gun control thing because I happen to. I called in a few times before. I think the last time I called in was the Atheist and Foxholes thing, and getting on that, I happen to disagree with you on that, on the mere fact that I believe that the problem with gun control and gun violence is that it's a lot of it is illegal guns that are doing that, and thus with the sorry, I'm having a hard time thinking. With the Second Amendment, a lot of people don't realize is that the fact that the National Guard is actually the militia, so the right to bear arms sort of is a muddy subject when you consider that. But I happen to think that a lot of gun violence is just done because people aren't properly trained with it. And I think if a lot of people went through the training that I went through, when it came to gun control, that I don't see it being a problem.
Well, that's one of our things on our platform is that we recommend that we should have standardized training for people who do get guns. So we're in agreement on that point.
Yeah, I just don't like to have my use restricted because I went through that training. I've gone through, filled out all the forms correctly, and I've definitely jumped through a few hoops when it came to that.
Jackson, it sounds to me like you would have already fulfilled the requirements that they had set in place. I'm a gun owner as well. I'm on your page.
That's what I was thinking.
But I have no problem with you educate yourself. You must be accountable. You must be a responsible, educated gun owner. I don't see why we stand apart on this particular issue.
And I think on the gun show loophole too, it sounds like that would be in agreement with you because that is a source of untracked, guns that then are illegally sold elsewhere. So that kind of, I think, is in support of your point generally as well.
Jackson, thank you so much for the call. I very much appreciate it. Got to move on.
Thank you.
Timothy, thank you so much for waiting. You are on the Thinking Atheist podcast with Jacob Kramer and Troy Boyle of the National Atheist Party. You have a question?
Hey, how's it going?
Good.
Hey, okay. So I'm an atheist, and right now I'm attending. I'm sorry, I slightly misunderstood the topic of today's show, but I think it may still be somewhat relevant. But I'm an atheist who right now I'm attending a very fundamentalist Christian university. Long story, but
wow, that must be hard.
Sometimes it can be, definitely, but right now I've gotten involved with I've basically gotten together a group of other free thinkers at the university, but I have aspirations at some point to become more heavily involved with the atheist community in an activist capacity. And right now, obviously, I'm a little bit restricted due to my school circumstances. But in the meantime, what options do I have?
Oh, you have a lot of options. There are so many internet groups springing up around atheism, the Secular Student Coalition, the Freedom from Religion Foundation, the American Atheists are just a few examples, including the National Atheist Party in your state. What state did you say you're from?
Tennessee.
Tennessee, awesome. You could join our Tennessee state chapter and interface with atheists from all over Tennessee, including my good friend Jeff Martin, who's very active in the Tennessee chapter. as for what you could do at your school, why not start a secular students organization there in your fundamentalist school and show them that you mean business?
Yeah, I have looked into that. Right now, it is not going to get approved.
Those private schools do have complete control over what groups and clubs. If it is a private religious school, they can limit what clubs they'll accept as official student clubs, and also sometimes they can control your speech a little bit. They are basically allowed to kind of suspend some of your First Amendment rights if you choose to go to those private schools. One thing I would say, if you do have a group and you organize it, in all the state chapters, even if you just joined to get that information, we did gather a list of all the American Atheist affiliates, all of the meetups, any of the Facebook groups that are there for within your state that are just kind of there as discussion boards. So if you did check out the Tennessee chapter, you should look in the docs of that group, and you'll find a whole list of all the organizations and pages and discussion forums for your state, so you can network with some other people.
Okay, Timothy, what website is that again?
Well, just if you're on Facebook, look for National Atheist Party of Tennessee.
Okay.
There's also a states directory that's right on the main link, right on the main scroll of the website, usanap.org.
Many thanks, Timothy. You got to move on. Thanks for the call very much.
All right.
Area code 605. Thank you for your patience. You're on the Thinking Atheist podcast, talking to Troy Boyle and Jacob Kramer of the National Atheist Party. You have a question for him?
Yeah. Is this me? Am I on?
It's you, and you're on. What's up?
Excellent. I never thought I'd get on this show.
Glad to have you.
Yeah. Great. I was gonna ask you guys, the two that are guesting on your show right now. I was going to ask them, I consider myself an independent, but I'm more liberal on a lot of my issues because those tend to be issues that coincide with reality. If you know what I mean? And
we exactly know what you mean.
Yeah. So I know that most of the politicians nowadays, especially those on the right, they run under the fact that they're religious, just because it seems to be in this country that you have to be religious to get elected. But personally, I was just curious, you guys think Barack Obama is religious? Because I really don't think he is. And the vast majority of Democrats are closet atheists? Because I suspect that that's the case.
Troy, you want to take this one?
Well, I don't think that I would be comfortable giving an opinion over whether or not President Obama's stated religious affiliation is a falsehood. But one thing I can say about President Obama is that he is the only president in my living memory, and the only president I've ever heard of, to publicly acknowledge the existence of people of no religion. So at least on that single score, he's head and shoulders above every president that has come before him.
Yeah, I live in the Chicago area, and he's been an active state politician here, and running through senator. We had a lot more. If you're not from Illinois, he ran against Alan Keyes, another huge carpetbagging theocrat who came here. So his record was followed very closely when he was elected, and this is very active ties to the church here. I would say he may be completely honest. The point of atheists sometimes is we realize a lot of people who say they're Christians do not necessarily follow the doctrine and have a lot of secular values because they have to, because as you said, reality supports kind of those secular values and are banning a lot of the kind of harmful doctrines that the Bible advertises. But I'd say he's, as religious as Christian as a lot of people, and maybe not as many others, and it's, and that's up for him, and he is completely free to have any belief or affiliation that he wants.
Thank you so much for the call.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Have a good time.
All right, let's talk about Barack Obama. He acknowledged atheists, and he has been lauded by the atheist community for doing so. In fact, I have noticed that despite the fact he participates in God speak from time to time, as all presidents are expected to do, he's been given largely a pass by the atheist community. They always say, well, yeah, I think he's a closet atheist. I don't think he really believes. He's just playing the game. All right, he's just playing the game. Well, that's fine. If we're going to make fun of Perry, we're going to make fun of Perry and Michelle Bachmann and all these other people, we've got to talk about a guy who spent 20 years in the church of batshit crazy Jeremiah Wright from Trinity United Church of Christ in Chicago. Batshit crazy. And this guy's a member for 2 decades, and we as atheists give him a pass. We admire him. Oh, he's secretly an atheist. I'm having a hard time making that connection and supporting him. On top of that, whether he has publicly mentioned and supported atheism or not, I look at his policies. Now, this is an individual thing. This is where we get into everyone's got a nuanced opinion, right? The guy who called said, well, I found that mostly liberalism lines up with reality. Well, often that may be the case, sure. But if you're a fiscal conservative like I am and you look at the wild, crazy, reckless, rampant spending, bleeding of taxpayer dollars and no end in sight, much of it perpetrated by Barack Obama, even if he came out and said, I'm an atheist in the Oval Office tomorrow, how could I as a voter support that? It's a very difficult issue. Either one of you guys want to speak to that?
Well, like you said, it's a personal issue. You're going to throw... if he came out and said he was an atheist, you're going to throw that on the scale, and you're going to throw your desire for economic responsibility and smaller government on the other, and you're going to have to decide for yourself which one weighs more.
The year 2012 for me is just going to suck. I mean, talk to me. Let's just talk personally, really. We're just 3 guys sitting around over a beer, okay? I look at every candidate and I think to myself, all the genuinely qualified leaders they're gone. They're off doing their thing, right? And we get left with the runoff. I look at every candidate on every side from every position and every debate doing everything on TV, in print, everywhere, and I just shake my head and say, we're screwed. We're totally hosed. Yeah. Do you guys want to share an opinion about 2012?
Well, I would say I just feel like we don't have an honest discourse, in politics anymore. And I feel, with Citizens United and the further deterioration of, campaign finance and even to be able to track where that money goes. And I think just the general engagement of a populace who feel completely disenfranchised and feel like their vote is meaningless and that they don't have a lot of choices because we are dominated by a two-party system, these are the consequences. And for my part, I'm just trying to do my part to have another, still small voice here in the democracy that's at least going to be honest and represent another group of people who I feel need to be openly represented and do have a number of things in common that they should articulate. And as we said, to kind of rebrand and destigmatize what that name is, but to also just have a more honest discussion about, reality.
It goes back to what I said before about bipartisan intransigence. With 2 parties so polarized and a guaranteed filibuster on every bill, and a deadlock that you just can't get past, this is the time that American politics needs to evolve and start developing more grassroots political organizations like the National Atheist Party, which is actually a constitutional party, but we need to start forming coalition governments that have to compromise in order to work, because that's how diversity gets things done. Bipartisanship does not work. It's like a seesaw. One side goes down, the other side goes up. You can't run a government like a seesaw.
I realize it's naive to say that you shouldn't always compromise or you shouldn't compromise. But sometimes if I go in and I have a strong conviction about any particular topic, any particular issue, maybe it's about our foreign policy or the use of the military, or it's about our borders, the enforcement of the borders, it's about this or that, and I compromise, I'm to a degree, I might be selling out. I mean, if I'm truly a person of conviction, is compromise always a laudable thing? Sometimes when you compromise, you simply water yourself down. The other party waters themselves down, and you might get something passed. But there's a time to stick to your guns, no?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I agree too. In those instances, in those circumstances, your passion and your drive and education have got to overwhelm the issue to the point where you can accomplish something. You're right as far as convictions that are deeply held, but at the same time, I still feel the need to say that in a nation of diversity, where you have 300 million people from diverse ideological backgrounds, compromise really should be the first thing that you try. And I don't necessarily think that every single piece of legislation that comes out of compromise is watered down.
I think about when Ross Perot ran as the independent. I know he's a punchline, but there was a brief microsecond in political time when he was possibly going to become the president of the United States, and he would talk about compromise. We're going to get there and we're going to go out there and get some consensus. Well, I got there, we'll lead by consensus. We're going to have consensus. He used to use the word like a catchphrase all the time. And,
nice.
when
How often do you get to bust out your Ross Perot impression?
Well, I've been saving it since the 90s.
That's good.
Consensus like a little granny in the basement.
That's before he started talking about Secret Service agents in the bushes outside his house.
That guy, his cheese definitely slid off its cracker. I totally get that. But honestly, I understand the challenges that come with a bicameral system. We're talking about two entrenched ideologies. They're all blaming each other. They're all bickering and bitching and moaning, and it's always the other person's fault. Nothing gets done. What was the approval rating on Congress? It was like 7%, 8%.
Yeah, single digits.
The lowest ever recorded ever in the history of, and everyone still continues to point fingers. I think one thing I do agree with you on is that more choices, more options, more parties, more to choose from, I think would be better. I think the other challenge may be money. Don't you have to be a millionaire to become any sort of influential politician anymore? You got to be money, don't you?
Well,
you have to raise it.
United, yeah. Well, you have to raise it, but now as Citizens United, you can have somebody else complete funding it, and you can through a super PAC. They can fund and run ads, for you or against another candidate, on an issue that's never connected to you that you're supposedly not coordinating with. I don't know. So the money, at least that you have to raise it, and that's a challenge. Is still there, but at the same point, the responsibility for the messages that get sent out on your behalf is completely taken away, and there's no responsibility, and it doesn't trail back to the candidate who's running the negative ads.
Before I go back to the phones,
people on their behalf.
Before I go back to the phones, very quickly, I just lost my train of thought. You ever do that? I do it more and more as I get older. It's like walking into the room and you're holding your car keys and you go, "Where are my keys?" It'll come to me here in a second. Let's go to the phones. Let's talk to area code 720. Hi, you're on the Thinking Atheist podcast. Who's this?
This is David. How you doing?
David, thanks for your patience. You were on the air. You're speaking with Troy Boyle, the president, and Jacob Kramer, the VP of Outreach for the National Atheist Party. You have a comment or question?
Yes, sir. It's nice to speak to you finally, but I started up with the Atheist Party. I found you on Facebook. And I was attracted by the name myself, because I'm kind of a new atheist myself. But in a way, I'm kind of hung up on the name as much as I like it. It's when I get into discussions with other people, you mention the word atheist, and it just screams out, "Oh my God, you're an atheist!" And everybody just freaks out. And it gets kind of the same way. Notably, a friend of mine was talking about atheism, and I mentioned that I was trying to do something with the National Atheist Party, and she just turned white. She says, "They're in politics too?"
That's great. Well, can I ask, after you kind of introduce either the National Atheist Party, you talk about it, and people challenge you or have an initial negative reaction, or at least an initial emotional reaction, what conversation do you have afterwards? And how does that conversation end up?
A lot of the times, honestly, it just turns into preaching. But
so your concern is that the term atheist automatically shuts all doors. It closes opportunities. Is that the argument?
Yeah, and I was thinking, if want to gather members, the name National Atheist Party is good for gathering more atheists or agnostics or freethinkers, but for anybody else, it scares the crap out of them, and they just it's the devil, They don't want to have anything to do with it.
Well, that's fine. We are aware now of a growing demographic in the United States, and Richard Dawkins has mentioned it, and of course Christopher Hitchens, who is now no longer with us, mentioned that the non-religious in the United States now number some 17 to 20% of the population. Now that's 60 million people. So if we want to represent a demographic and we want to try and build consensus among free thinkers and marginalized secularists like secular Christians and secular Buddhists and secular Muslims and secular Wiccans, then I think the National Atheist Party is the right name to draw them under our banner.
Yeah, and I would just like to point out, I asked you about the conversation because I would hope that would start a conversation about what we do stand for and what you would do in fact believe, and that this party does not. We want to protect people's religious freedom. We just want to keep it out of government, so that conversation would end in a positive way. My point would be, once you bring up that word, that door was already closed. But that door's not going to get opened up unless we knock. And so the name National Atheist Party and the act of kind of saying I'm an atheist is that knock to start a discussion. And they may start preaching at you, but they have to open up the door a little bit. And hopefully they'll have to listen to you a little bit as well.
Thank you so much for the call. Much appreciated.
All right. Thank you.
I did a blog on thethinkingatheist.com a few months back called Atheism on the Rise, where I was able to put together many of these statistics that you had mentioned about they say it's the fastest growing religious group because they don't know how else to categorize it, right? Non-religion, non-belief. And I often hear theists and creationists and people who are debating and defending God telling me that there's a revival going on here in America. Oh, the churches, the people are coming, and the politicians are now saying this. They're saying, we've got to put God back into we're a Christian nation, which is absolutely false, by the way. But if you get a chance,
the data doesn't support those conclusions.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely wrong. It tells you how little we were taught about our founding fathers. But I have statistics on my website. Look for the blog Atheism on the Rise. And another curious thing, that the people who say, 90% of America believes in God, meaning that there's an overwhelming majority of people who are religious who are going to vote religiously, right? Well, according to the survey that was done by a Harris poll, God covered a whole load of stuff that wasn't Christian. It was just kind of a shotgun of wild, weird, religious, spiritual stuff. 42% surveyed believed in ghosts, 32% UFOs, 26% astrology, 23 witches. 1 out of 5 believed in reincarnation. Now, these were all placed in the I believe in God category. It's not Christianity, Not even
it happens when you look at the data.
Yeah, I blame Reagan for that. In the 1980s, Reagan was really the first president to sort of band together the disparate sects of Christianity and begin referring to them under the umbrella term Christian. Before that, it was Catholics and Methodists and Lutherans and Calvinists and whatever other sect denomination that they like to call themselves. But since about 1985 or 86, I think, Christians have sort of done away with that and referred to themselves in this umbrella manner. And it's not descriptive of their beliefs. In much the way that you accused the National Atheist Party of not representing every atheist, well, the term Christian does not represent every Christian.
Yeah, I was thinking about that when Rick Santorum, he got like in I guess he's Catholic, but he got an evangelical endorsement. That's a pretty big one, and he said, will this help him, push over the edge in South Carolina? And he's relying on that. And both he and Newt Gingrich have been kind of trying to out, religious right each other. That's like, I would love to hear, like, in South Carolina, this person got the Secular Coalition of America endorsement, and will this sway it, and we don't hear that. We need that. We need that to be a kind of a badge of honor, I think, in our country.
Are you guys hoping to field a candidate? You want to put an atheist candidate out there in the crosshairs?
Eventually. It's going to be a function of money. It's going to be a function of membership. You need to grow to a certain size in every state in order to accomplish their ballot requirements. And we certainly have our sights set on that, but we're still a fledgling organization, and we're not there yet.
Let's go back to the phones very quickly. Let's talk to area code 646. Thank you for your patience. You're on the Thinking Atheist podcast, and you're speaking with Troy and Jacob from the National Atheist Party.
Yeah, absolutely. Good evening, gentlemen. I guess my question is good. Thank you. I was watching the chat room early on here in the discussion, and there was a lot of people just kind of went 20 different directions. They're dropping things like the Occupy Wall Street movement, equating you guys to leftist liberals, and whatever the case may be. I don't think we've actually reached the point in the discussion where anyone can draw a conclusion completely about it. But my question is, Richard Dawkins once said that getting atheists organized is kind of like herding cats. And I was wondering if you guys had an idea or a plan for how to kind of bring atheists and free thinkers and people in general who are non-religious or secular and kind of banding them together and getting them on board with this whole thing.
It's interesting that you should mention that interview with Dr. Dawkins, because it was while listening to that same interview that I heard him express frustration that American atheists had not organized politically before, and it was kind of directly after listening to that interview that Mark Smith and I founded this party. In a sense, Richard Dawkins threw down the gauntlet, and we picked it up. And I think that if you look at the demographics of our party, you will find that there are free thinkers, there's humanists, there's secular humanists, there are Wiccans, we have some Christians, we have some other theists in our party that are actively doing good things and actively trying to reinforce and bolster the wall of separation between church and state. There are one thing that people don't often realize is that the wall of separation benefits not only the non-religious, but it benefits the religious as well, because who wants the government's nose in your business? You know? So what is our plan? What is our strategy? It's to reach out to those folks, to get in the newspapers, to get on the internet, to make ourselves known, to make ourselves a household word, and let them come to us.
That sounds good. Yeah, I follow you guys on Facebook and everything too, and I've been definitely excited about it. I hope that this is able to grow to a size where it's effective. I think it's definitely necessary. I volunteer with as many organizations as I can, and I think that I'll definitely look for an opportunity here in New York City to do that with you guys as well.
Thank you so much for the call.
We appreciate it.
Take care of yourself.
Yeah.
Almost sounds like a joke, doesn't it? You know, an atheist, a theist, and a Wiccan went to a bar. You know, well, we have a big tent and all are welcome. The idea of those wildly diverse backgrounds all coming together to achieve consensus, to me, does sort of raise an eyebrow. It's certainly something I'd like to be a fly on the wall when it happens. 916, you're on the Thinking Atheist podcast, talking with Troy Boyle, Jacob Kramer of the National Atheist Party. What's your name?
Hi, my name is Caleb. I've been following the chat for a little bit now, and I just sorry, I'm not really good at speaking.
No, take your time. You're doing fine.
Yeah, one of my main issues with this party is why exactly is it called the National Atheist Party? I mean, you guys kind of talked about that before, but I mean, I personally, am an atheist Republican, socially liberal, but I don't have any of the views of this party, and I know you have the whole consensus thing, but I mean, why not just call it like the National Pizza Party for people who like pizza, but because
Well, I can answer that. It's a demographic descriptor. If we were a party made up of purple pigs, we'd be the National Purple Pig Party. The atheism is who we were. It was who our membership was, and it was the vote that they decided to take. Now, you, as a Republican atheist, are fully empowered to gather like-minded people and found the Republican Atheist Party, and I hope you do.
But the thing is, I don't see why there needs to be an atheist Republican Party. Because
Well, whether you know it or not, the current Republican Party is the Christian Republican Party, whether you admit that or not.
No. A lot of Christians are Republicans, but it doesn't make it the Christian Republican Party.
I think what he is saying, having come from that background when I was a theist, is that you can't look at a single Republican candidate right now who is not at some level bullhorning God and Christian values as part of their platform. And there are, I think, some conservatives out there, there are some people who are conservatives who have, let's say, fiscal conservative values. Let's say they're like me. I mean, I'm socially liberal, right? I believe it's a woman's right to choose. Stem cell research, I'm all about it. I mean, all of those things, all those social issues, I'm down with. But fiscally, I'm more of a conservative. I'm low tax. I'm about the individual. I'm free market. I don't see the Republicans as representing me at all. So I think what they're saying is the major players, the people who are representing the party, they're all wildly religious.
Well, that's what Troy claims. But my other point to that is, it becomes like a game of semantics, and it's like I would want to call you something else because there's something that I identify about you more than what you choose to identify yourself as. It's like, if I'm not a member of the Democratic Party, should I be upset because I support democracy? If I value personal liberty, my personal liberties, but I'm not a libertarian, should I ask the Libertarian Party to change their name? It becomes, it's those parties exist. And, as I pointed out before, the Republican Party used to be the Democratic Party. It's what they brand themselves as. It's the values that they have that you need to look into, and develop. And I perfectly understand your point, but in some ways it's a nomenclatural dodge. And the intent as we came in is that we wanted all atheists, whether they're formally identified as Republicans or Libertarians or they're very progressive, to come in and just say, this is what I believe and this is what I think should happen. Can we please get a policy statement on that, or vote on the issues that our policy committees come up with, and you can vote them up or down, and we'll let the chips fall wherever they may. And if we can't reach a 66% or above consensus on that, then that's not a platform issue, or that's not a specific issue that we can try to advocate and support as a National Atheist Party, because we can't find that. And it will be up to individual members, state chapters to take action, or eventually it's a way for the candidates to decide where they're at on those issues, and membership can vote.
Got to move on. Thank you so much for the call. Appreciate it.
Thank you for letting me.
Thank you.
815, you're on the Thinking Atheist podcast. Who's this?
Travis.
Travis, thanks for your patience. You are on the air.
I was curious, how do we, I'm like a recent becoming atheist. I was agnostic beforehand, but I was raised in a Republican family. How do we not have a bias towards the Republicans? Like, being atheist and knowing all the current candidates are, evangelical Christians, like, how do we not have a bias?
Well, I typically vote Democrat. I have voted for Republican before. I voted for one in my local district a few years ago. That's easy to do sometimes in local elections where the candidate can actually have their own principles. The issue is, what most people identify with and follow is the federal government. They're not allowed to be individuals or not vote the party line or actually stand up for their principles, unless they have a very special district. And even so, there might be consequences from the national party. So I had an individual who was a female and a teacher, and she actually, after some pressure, voted for the civil unions bill that we passed in Illinois. And as a teacher, she had a reasonable stance on education, and I'm a teacher as well. So I guess I rewarded her for the things I thought were positive by voting for her, even though I don't typically vote Republican. But that's a lot harder to find, like in our politics. And I wish the Democratic and Republican parties would be, would be able to offer more options and be able, people to be run on their own principles, unlike they are now.
Thank you for the call. Very much appreciated. It is interesting how, I don't know about you guys, but I come from, generations before us, right? Our fathers and our grandfathers used to, I know one of you is from Kentucky, right? So you can probably really relate, but it was always something along the lines of, my great granddaddy voted Democrat, and my daddy voted Democrat, and damn it, I'm voting Democrat too. It's just we've always been Republican.
I'm from Southern Illinois, so that sounds pretty similar.
You guys, it resonates with you, right? This family's been a Republican family for hundreds of years. And so what happens is they've essentially announced, I have stopped thinking. If you ask them about the specific stance of any candidate, who they are, what they stand for, what their voting record is, I don't know. They got an R by their name, and that's how I'm voting. And they've now made public and worn as a badge of honor the fact that they have shut down rational thought, and they're voting labels, and that's unfortunately pretty common.
Yeah.
Well, that's identification behavior. That's mammalian attachment. That's a normal thing, and you're going to have this core of Democratic voters, and you're going to have a core of Republican voters. Someday in the far future, I hope there'll be a core of National Atheist Party voters. I don't think there's a real way around that. You can't dictate reason, to people. So you just have to hope that you can be compelling enough and convincing enough, and vote your conscience.
Mammalian attachments.
I know, I was just thinking that.
We're doing an atheism and sexuality episode in February, and that sounds like something that we may have to cover. With the mammalian attachment, and part of our program will be forthcoming in February. I've got a message that was emailed, or actually it was on our Facebook page. It said, I'm glad you're doing a show on this. Absolutely everyone in my free thought group thinks this is a bad idea. Most of them are liberals who agree with the majority of the platform they've developed. It's simply ridiculous to frame a political party around the rejection of an ideology. It would be like trying to form a cohesive platform among a group of people who don't like the color orange or didn't collect stamps. They wouldn't have anything else in common. I totally understand that we need representation in government, as we are a larger minority than blacks, Jews, and gays combined, but we are considered unelectable. But by calling ourselves the National Atheist Party, claiming to represent all atheists in the country, and having read their platform, they definitely don't speak for me. I resent the implied assertion that they do. I'm almost finished here. I'm sorry, another sentence. It said they should have called themselves the damn liberal atheist party. You guys want to speak to that?
Okay, so there was a punchline on there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand both of those, but they're a direct opposition to statements we've already made on this broadcast.
Yeah.
Number one is we are not formed around the idea of atheism.
No. Yeah.
We are formed around the idea of a consensus of opinion in a demographic. And that's a completely different kettle of fish.
Either of you guys ever interested in, putting on the suit and tie and the flannel shirt and going out and running for elected office?
Oh, I don't think I have any more flannel shirts left over from the 90s.
I'm just saying, you always see them out there. They're always on the farm rolling their sleeves up. I relate to the common man. Now, where's the limo? That kind of thing. Do you have any political aspirations?
Serious thoughts about it, yeah. I've had serious thoughts about it. I'm in law school right now, so mostly I'm concerned with getting my grades up and getting my homework in on time. But yeah, I've definitely thought about a political career. Certainly.
Which one of you is from Kentucky?
That's me, Troy. Yeah.
Talk to me about being a major part at the top of the tier of the National Atheist Party, and you're located in Kentucky.
Yeah,
how's that working for you?
Well, actually, I live in northern Kentucky.
I was
born
okay. Sure.
Yeah.
What was I thinking? I don't know the difference. You're going to have to spell it out for me. I'm an Oklahoma boy, so what does that mean?
Well, I'm going to tell you. I was born in Los Angeles, and when I was 7 years old, we moved to northern Kentucky, which is economically dependent upon the nearby city of Cincinnati, Ohio. So even though northern Kentuckians are ostensibly Kentuckians, our worldview is shaped by this nearby, very cosmopolitan metropolis. So northern Kentuckians, I have found, in my lifetime, have been very open to people of different faiths, different ideologies, and different backgrounds. Now, central Kentucky and lower, I'm not so sure, but northern Kentucky's been good to me.
503, hi, you're on the Thinking Atheist podcast. What's your name?
Hi, Andrew Tice.
Andrew, thank you for your patience. You are speaking with Jacob Kramer and Troy Boyle of the National Atheist Party. Comment or question for us?
Well, yeah, I guess I would like to comment on that last email that you had and also talk about just the party platform in general.
Please do.
Yeah, for me, I follow politics very, very closely. It's kind of a really horrible addiction. And I'm well aware of all of the polls that come out saying that an atheist could never be elected. I think we're liked least than Muslims, and we all know the Islamophobia in our country. However, with regard to a platform and basing a platform off of, the ideology of rejecting deity, I think that it's actually a very humanist idea, and it's a very realist idea because it forces us, rather than retreating back to some dogma that we might have, which unfortunately drives many of the decisions that parties make, or they say it does. It drives how they try to recruit people. I think we don't have that to fall back on. So we have to really look at and think objectively and think rationally and try to decide what is in the best interest of the most people, of our environment, of our civics.
Exactly. We have to examine the data. We have to look at scientific conclusions. We have to look at what is supported by the evidence.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I heard this a lot. I'm trying to think. I was reading Thomas Frank's new book. I don't want to plug, but he mentions that we're going into the age of ideology, and you can see that within the conservative party in this country. I mean, they blindly latch on to an ideology that they have shown time and again they don't understand, and the ideology itself has shown time and again to be detrimental to equality in this country and detrimental to our economy. So I would actually argue that an atheist would be a better person to represent the country because they're not there with their preconceived notions. They're not there with this belief that, oh, yes, you have this life, but it doesn't really matter. There's a better one coming down the stretch.
Well, I mean, that's exactly the point of this party. Obviously, we formed this party and came together because we think we have good ideas. And for all the reasons that you said there, we want to have evidence-based conclusions on policy about what best supports, individual and societal well-being. And that's the core of the party. And, as Troy kind of made the discussion of morals and ethics earlier, that, not believing there's an absolute morality that we have to adhere to, instead have to look at the situation and look how policy affects individuals, that absolutely has consequences on the way people govern. You're preaching to the choir here, for sure.
Thank you so much for the call. I don't know about you guys, but I am convinced we've had many atheist presidents. They didn't say so publicly, but under their skin, they didn't buy it, right? There has to have been.
That's true, yeah.
I don't know. What do you think?
I think it's definitely true. Well, I think, and people name themselves all kinds of other things, and that's why people said we should call ourselves, we ourselves, at least at the executive board level, because we've talked about the name and the issue, a lot, because it gets brought up every time we have a whole swath of new members. They want to bring that up and have a discussion about it. So it's something we regularly address. We use atheist as the most simple definition, is that anybody who thinks it's not reasonable to claim that a God exists is an atheist. So secular, humanist, free thinker, all those other terms, we consider them, atheists, at that point. That's why that demographic descriptor for us at least how we use it. Other people may feel differently or use terms like agnostic and things like that, but to us, that's atheist. It's a much more inclusive term of the demographic of secular advocates.
One final time to the phones. 358. Thanks for waiting. You're on the Thinking Atheist podcast. Who's this?
Yeah, I'm Samus Reddy. I'm talking from Helsinki, Finland.
Finland, welcome. Thank you so much for calling, sir. You are on the air with Jacob and Troy from the National Atheist Party. Question or comment for them?
One comment and one question. The question would be that have the National Atheist Party ever worked with Europeans like us? Because around here, the question about atheism isn't as polarized as this in the United States. And as a suggestion, I've been working with the local Pirate Party, which is a rising party as well, a small party. And we have similar problems, man. One of the strategies I've suggested for them as a member was to capture the middle ground and then only in the most pressing issue, which in your case would be atheism, to go with something that differs from the middle ground, what everybody thinks, the consensus. So how about those two?
Well, yeah, certainly. What you're saying is that in order to be politically effective, you have to represent the greatest number of people and the most common interests of those people. And I think that's certainly good advice. You can't take an unpopular left field stance that would be a turnoff to everyone, like promoting, for instance. I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but promoting, giving away free guns to every household in America. I mean, that would be ridiculous. So yeah, I understand what you mean. You have to appeal to the majority, and we do that from a position of establishing consensus and making our platform well known, and then accepting those who agree with it. I think that's all anybody can do.
Well, I think the other point he's making is to focus on kind of a key issue and make that kind of your cornerstone of what you're pushing to get attention on that issue, where we've kind of talked about that, and we're trying to do something very similar with the national campaign. Decide what's the key issue that we will make a 6-month plan that we'll focus on raising money for, raising awareness about, lobbying our representatives for, and some of those things the community are those social issues, things that Seth Appley puts, that we're in agreement about and allows a real difference between us and the major parties, such as gay rights and things like that.
Well, one thing that we would like to know, and one campaign that we've kicked off as of January 1st, is to ask all of our elected officials, and you can help us on this broadcast, as a matter of fact, to ask our elected officials, either those that are running for office or those who are incumbents, how are you going to represent your atheist constituents? Because I think that the consensus among the Republican and Democrat frontrunners is to ignore us completely, and that's not going to work anymore.
Yeah. The National Atheist Party wants to get every single politician on the record addressing this question. Whether it's by text, whether you record it, whether you have audio, we want to start a directory to make sure they have to take a stand. They have to address this, even if it's no comment.
Very quickly, let's speak to a challenge that goes well beyond Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, Green Party, Independent, whatever. We are in a culture where more people know the details of the television show Jersey Shore than they know about the vice president or our policies overseas or the tax code or the local, regional, state, and federal issues that come against us every day. People are the children of pop culture to vote, but they're not plugged in. And there's an education gap it's very disheartening. Do you guys have any opinions on that? I mean, you're running essentially on an education platform, right? We find out what the facts are. We examine the models. We try to build consensus. We vote. But, you know, you are in a country where people think satire is something you wear. You know what I'm saying? It's a real challenge. I mean, do you have any opinions on that?
You know, when Karl Marx said that religion is the opiate of the masses, he only said that because there wasn't television yet. And I think you're absolutely right that the kids of pop culture are not well informed in the majority, but I have also seen a very vocal minority of college-age students and high school students that are very well informed, and the place they're getting their information is not the television, it's the internet. And so I think what we're seeing is a kind of a shift in where people get their information and how they take action on that information. And I think that's a good thing.
Having diverse and very political movements and organizations, you know, is a good way that they can feel like they have an outlet to engage, you know, in whatever way they think, you know, is going to be positive. You know, and as a teacher, I definitely encourage that. That's one of the reasons I became active in the community like you are, and trying to build that community and build an outlet for people who don't feel like they have one.
I will say that when I was a believer, and I was a public believer, I was on the radio, I spoke from the stage, I noticed now, looking back, that I could have said just about anything, I mean, within reason. And what I would have gotten back from the audience was, amen, 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 preach it, you know, that kind of thing. I wasn't preaching, but it was the nodding of the head, the instant acceptance. When I say something now as admin of the Thinking Atheist Facebook page, or I put something in a video out there that is absorbed by the free thought community, I better be damn sure I've got my facts right. And when I don't, I hear about it immediately. And although I am dubious about the National Atheist Party, its viability, I mean, I still have some real challenges with it. The one thing I do think a party like that might have in its favor is if you have critical thinkers, people who don't take your word for it, right? People who will go out and do the math, who will use the internet, use the resources for education they have at their fingertips. They'll check the figures and they'll come back and make your argument better. Would you guys agree with that?
Yeah, that's absolutely my thought too. Yeah, absolutely.
Any final thoughts for our audience before we call it a day? You guys have been really, great to stick yourselves in the crosshairs for the last hour and 20 minutes. I know you've had some people show up on your pages who have been none too kind, and I'm sorry about that. If you haven't filtered apparently off of one of my pages, and I have real guilt. Sorry about that, man.
That's nothing new. We get it all the time. Don't worry about it. The people who disagree with us, will always be the ones who are loudest.
Hey, I don't have a problem with you and I. We're having a conversation. We have disagreements, but we're having a conversation. It's when someone shows up and says, "Jesus, you're an idiot. Oh my God, and the name calling begins. That kind of thing it makes my head explode.
Insults aren't necessary. Facts will do. Yeah.
All right. Some final thoughts then.
My last word is make up your own mind. Everybody who has an interest in the National Atheist Party after listening to this broadcast, drop by www.usanap.org and read our materials, look at our stance on the issues, and make up your own mind. We are a party that is composed of individuals and that is dedicated to supporting diversity. So if you feel like you could agree or do agree with some of the things you've heard today, stop by and give us a look and make up your own mind. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
What's the website again?
www.usanap.org, or also on Facebook at www.facebook.com/national.atheist.party.
Troy Boyle and Jacob Kramer of the National Atheist Party. Both of you, thank you so much for spending the last hour and 20 minutes with us. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much, sir.
Join us next Tuesday night. The show is called Harry Potter is of the Devil. And any of us who were raised in devoutly Christian cultures, or maybe you've read about it, or maybe you're just curious about it, will know what it was like to be raised where everything was evil. There were certain board games you couldn't play. Anyone who played Dungeons and Dragons was opening the portals to the spirit world. There were toys that were obviously tools of Satan to influence children. Albums that were played backwards to listen for hidden messages. They called it backward masking. People who find evil in every single thing they look at. We're going to talk about that. We're going to share your stories, which ought to be wildly entertaining. And we'll talk about why Harry Potter is of the devil. Thanks so much for listening. Have a great week.
Follow The Thinking Atheist on Facebook and Twitter. Watch dozens of original videos on the Thinking Atheist YouTube channel. And visit our website for resources, links, contact information, the editor's blog, and more. thethinkingatheist.com.